Welcome back to Middle School Minds, the Study Pod, the podcast that helps middle schoolers ace their classes.
That's right.
Today, we are taking a deep dive into nanotechnology.
A topic that might sound a little intimidating.
A little bit, but
Yeah.
actually, it's super cool
It is.
and relevant to your everyday life.
Absolutely.
But before we shrink our brains down to nano-size,
Okay.
it's time for everyone's favorite segment,
Oh, I love this segment.
Dad Jokes.
Yes.
Get ready to groan, because here it comes.
All right, I'm ready.
Why did the nanotechnologists win an award?
Why?
Because they did an atomic job.
Oh.
Okay, so now let's get serious about nanotechnology.
Okay.
Think about shrinking a basketball down to the size of a single atom.
Wow.
That's the scale we're talking about.
That's tiny.
It's all about manipulating materials at the atomic level to create all sorts of amazing things.
It's true. And it's not just about shrinking things down, though.
Well-
it's about harnessing the unique properties that materials exhibit at such a tiny scale. For example, imagine a material that's incredibly strong and lightweight because its atoms are arranged in a specific way.
Okay, that's pretty cool. But how is this actually affecting our lives?
Yeah.
Does this mean we'll all be driving tiny cars and living in microscopic houses?
Not quite, but nanotechnology is already making a big impact in all sorts of ways. Remember those touch screens on your phones and tablets?
Yeah.
Yep, that's nanotechnology at work.
Really? I never realized that.
It's everywhere.
So aside from our phones, where else can we find nanotechnology in action?
You're probably wearing some right now.
What?
Some clothes use nanotechnology to become stain resistant,
Right.
and those LED lights that are everywhere these days, they're brighter and more energy efficient thanks to nanotechnology.
Wow, so it's not just some futuristic concept.
Yeah.
It's already making things better in so many ways.
Absolutely. And you know what's really interesting? Our main source material focuses on something that you probably use every day, especially during the summer sunscreen.
Sunscreen, what does that have to do with nanotechnology?
Well, sunscreen works by using certain ingredients to block harmful UV radiation from the sun. You know, the stuff that can cause sunburns and even skin cancer.
Yeah, my mom is always on me about wearing sunscreen. She says it's super important.
She's absolutely right. And two of the key ingredients in sunscreen are zinc oxide and titanium oxide. They're great at reflecting those harmful UV rays, but traditional zinc oxide has a bit of a, shall we say, cosmetic issue.
You mean how it leaves that thick white layer on your skin?
Yeah,
I'm not a fan of that ghost look.
exactly. But thanks to nanotechnology, scientists have been able to create nano-sized zinc oxide particles.
Oh.
These tiny particles are still effective at blocking UV rays, but they're so small that they don't leave that telltale white cast.
So basically, nanotechnology helps sunscreen become invisible. That's pretty awesome.
Precisely, and guess what? That's exactly what you'll be exploring in your upcoming lab report for integrated technology class. It's all about comparing regular sunscreen with nano-enhanced sunscreen and seeing the difference firsthand.
Oh, right, the lab report. I actually forgot about that. I was a little nervous, to be honest.
Don't worry, we'll break it down for you. This lab is a classic for a reason. You get to see nanotechnology in action literally right there in the Petri dishes.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. So, what exactly are we going to be doing in this lab?
First, you'll be observing the color and consistency of both types of sunscreen. You might notice that the regular sunscreen appears a bit whiter or thicker compared to the nano-enhanced sunscreen.
Oh, okay, I can handle that. What happens next?
Then comes the really fun part. You'll be setting up Petri dishes with special beads that are sensitive to UV light.
Okay.
One dish will have the nano sunscreen, one will have the regular sunscreen, and one will have no sunscreen at all. That's your control group.
Okay, so we have our sunscreen samples and our UV-sensitive beads all set up in their Petri dishes. What do we do with them?
Now it's time to shine. You'll use a UV flak light to expose each dish to UV light and observe what happens to the beads. They're designed to change color when they're exposed to UV radiation.
So we're going to see how well each type of sunscreen protects the beads from the UV light.
You got it. And here's where your observation skills come in. You'll need to carefully record the color changes you observe in a data table. Make sure to repeat the process a few times to ensure your results are consistent and reliable.
Wait, why do we need to repeat the experiment multiple times? Wouldn't doing it once be enough?
That's a great question in science. It's important to make sure our results aren't just a fluke. Repeating the experiment helps us confirm that what we observed is actually due to the sunscreen and not some other random factor.
Oh, I see. So it's all about making sure our results are accurate and reliable.
Exactly. And as you're conducting the experiment, I want you to think about what's happening in each Petri dish. What's happening to those UV beads? How might the color change be related to the effectiveness of each type of sunscreen?
That's a good point. I'll definitely keep that in mind. Is there anything else we should be thinking about during the experiment?
Yes, remember, science is about asking questions and making connections. Think about what this experiment is actually showing us about the benefits of nanotechnology in everyday products like sunscreen.
Got it. Observe record and think critically. I'm ready to rock this lab report.
That's the spirit. But before you go full on science nerd, let's take a moment to unpack what we've covered so far. We've talked about what nanotechnology is, how it's being used in cool ways like touchscreens and LED lights, and how it's even revolutionizing something as simple as sunscreen.
Right. And we've also gone over the basic steps for the lab experiment, which honestly sounds pretty fun.
It is, but remember, it's not just about following the instructions, it's about understanding the science behind it all.
True. So before we move on to the next part where we'll dive deeper into the lab report and how to ace it, so we shined the UV light and watched those beads change colors. Expert speaker.
Yes.
And we diligently recorded our observations in a data table. Now, how do we transform all that into a stellar report?
The first step is to make sure that data table is clear, accurate, and organized. Think of it as the foundation of your report.
Got it. Treat my data like gold. But data is only part of the story.
Yeah.
Right? We need to explain what it all means. Connect the dots between what we saw and the science behind it.
Exactly. This is where you get to put on your analytical hat. Remember those questions we discussed earlier about what's happening in each dish, how the color changes relate to sunscreen effectiveness? Now's the time to answer them using your data as evidence.
Okay, so for example, let's say the UV beads under the nano sunscreen change color less dramatically than the ones under regular sunscreen. What would that suggest?
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
It would suggest that the nano sunscreen is doing a better job of blocking the harmful UV radiation, protecting the beads more effectively.
Ah, I see. Because the beads are designed to change color when exposed to UV light. Less change means better protection, and that's where the size of the zinc oxide particles comes in, right? The nano-sized particles in the nano sunscreen are more efficient at blocking the UV rays.
Precisely, you're connecting the dots beautifully. You're using your observations to support the idea that nanotechnology, in this case, the use of nano-sized zinc oxide, enhances the effectiveness of sunscreen.
So we're basically proving that the science behind nanotechnology actually works, but is that all there is to the report, just summarizing what we saw and how it relates to nanotechnology?
That's a good starting point, but a truly exceptional lab report goes a step further. Think about the implications of your findings. Ask yourself, why does this matter?
Good point. What questions should we be asking ourselves about this sunscreen experiment?
Well, for instance, if nano sunscreen is demonstrably more effective at blocking UV rays, what could that mean for people's health in the long run? Could it potentially lead to fewer sunburns or even better, a lower risk of skin cancer?
Wow, that's a big deal. It's like this little experiment is suddenly connected to something much bigger than just a grade in science class.
Exactly. Science isn't just about facts and figures. It's about understanding how those facts and figures impact our world and our lives by thinking about the real-world applications of your findings. You're demonstrating a deeper understanding of the subject.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture now. Now it's not just about proving nanotechnology works. It's about understanding how it can make a real difference in people's lives.
You're getting it. Now there's one more thing I want you to consider as you write your report.
What's that?
Remember how we talked about nano sunscreen being invisible on the skin? Well, while that might seem like a great thing aesthetically, it could potentially lead to some unintended consequences.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. If people can't see the sunscreen on their skin, they might forget to reapply it as often as they should.
Oh, that's true. I've definitely been guilty of that myself. I put sunscreen on once and think I'm good for the whole day.
Exactly, and that's where the invisibility of nano sunscreen could actually be a drawback. People might think they're protected when they're not, leading to more sunburns and potentially even an increased risk of skin damage.
Wow. I never thought of it that way. So even though nanotechnology can be a good thing, we still need to be aware of the potential downsides.
Absolutely. Every scientific advancement, no matter how amazing it seems, comes with its own set of challenges and considerations. That's why it's important to approach things critically, to think beyond the surface and to consider all angles.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We started by shrinking our brains down to the nanoscale to understand what nanotechnology is all about.
Then we dove into how this incredible technology is already making our lives better, from the touch screens on our phones to the clothes we wear.
And of course, we couldn't forget about sunscreen, that summertime essential that's getting a nano-sized upgrade. We talked about the lab experiment you guys are about to tackle. and how to analyze those results and turn them into a killer lab report.
We even touched on some of the potential downsides of nanotechnology, like the possibility that invisible sunscreen might lead to people underestimating the importance of reapplication.
Right. It's a good reminder that every scientific advancement comes with its own set of pros and cons. There's always more to consider than meets the eye.
Absolutely. And that's where critical thinking comes in. It's about asking tough questions, weighing the evidence, and forming your own informed opinions.
So as you embark on this nanotechnology lab report, remember that it's not just about following the steps. It's about engaging with the science, thinking critically, and maybe even uncovering some insights that surprise you.
And who knows, maybe this deep dive will spark a lifelong passion for science. Maybe one of you listening right now will become the next nanotechnology pioneer developing groundbreaking solutions to some of the world's biggest challenges.
That's what's so cool about science. It's full of possibilities. But for now, focus on rocking that lab report. Use what we've talked about today to guide your research, your analysis, and your writing. And most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions and have fun with it.
We're here to support you every step of the way. So until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and never stop learning.
From all of us here at Middle School Minds, the Study Pod, we'll catch you on the next deep dive. Before we wrap things up, it's time for another round of dad jokes.
Oh, no.
Get ready, because I've got another one for you.
Okay, hit me.
Why don't scientists trust atoms?
Oh, why?
Because they make up everything.
Oh, my goodness.
So until next time, stay curious,
Yeah.
keep exploring, and never stop learning.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.